And we are live. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Science of Business podcast. Today, my guest is Ian McIlwain, Director of Development and Partnerships at FutureLearn and former LinkedIn Learning Sales Director. Happy to have you here.
Yeah, great to be here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation, Radek.
And the topic for today is adult learning. And in specific, there is one thing that I really want to talk with Ian about, which is, are we more autonomous as learners, if there is any difference in our self-directedness? But this will come later on. First, we will have some questions that came from our audience. And even before that, I have one very small question to you, Ian, because I know you have quite a lot of experience with multiple learners that are or have to be in some way self-directed because they attend online courses. And I wonder, over this year, what was your number one realization about learners?
Yeah, well, over this year, or let's say 2 years, and I think everybody understands the context that we're talking about here is this huge digital transformation. Of course, it's been amazing to see what we can do online, what we can achieve with learning online, that may have been challenged in the past, or if not challenged and already happening, but rather happening at a slower pace. But I'd say within that, what we've seen, there's also this realization that depending on what you're learning, your own personality, why you're learning online can be a bit of a lonely experience. And I can't help but compare this with fitness and training and growing in that way as well. Depends on who you are. Maybe you want to go for a long run on your own, and that's how you reflect. But maybe you would be better off in a Zumba class or an aerobics class, or with a personal trainer, depending on what your goals are and what you're trying to do. So yeah, I'd say it's that really can be a lonely experience unless you have the options. It's not just about putting the things online.
So there is plenty of different things we can do online, but they all depend on our context, on what we actually, who we are in some way.
It can be the moment, it can be our personality, and it can be what we're trying to learn for what. And we have evidence around this. I mean, whilst it's been amazing to see what can be achieved, as I said, in this transformation and migration of a ton of different options online, we also see instances where learners don't or can't engage, not necessarily complete things, but we might see in the same company, let's say, or on the same day, a Zoom workshop being created where people know that they're going with their colleagues and it's going to be a bit more facilitated, or they're going to an online course where they're going through with a cohort, and they know that they can exchange and perhaps exchange outside the virtual experience. And we see higher levels of engagement and higher levels of completion, and therefore better outcomes and better chance of things being transferred into adaptation and real life and being put to use.
Yeah, I love it. And because sometimes what I see is that, for instance, people complain that massive online courses have very low completion rate. A lot of people quit when they started. But I think the conclusion from here is, it's not that generally online courses are bad, but just maybe for some people, for those who couldn't make it, maybe there was something missing, and we need to address individual learners and what is missing for them to make sure that they learn.
Yeah, almost certainly there is something missing if there isn't this element of exchange. Because even if, and go back to the analogy of training, and maybe even if I am somebody who prefers to go for a long run and I need that space and time, and I want to do that, I'll probably benefit from exchanging my stats at least with somebody on an app, seeing how other people are doing. But most of us, in reality, and I guess this is probably the realization about learners, most of us want to learn together, and we need to reflect together, or we need at least an option to do that. And sometimes, that's not necessarily us being active ourselves. In the classroom, I might learn vicariously just because of the other conversation that's going on, even if I'm not contributing. But there's lots of different elements, and we need to make sure that we have those options, because otherwise it's likely that something's going to be missing.
There is a very related question from Oscar that shared it before we started recording, which is how to address transfer in those settings where people are rather self-paced. So there is no instructor, there is no live meetings. Most often, this would be just online course that you do asynchronously. How to make sure that people do implement their learnings in their life? What are your practices in this?
Yes, thank you for the question, Oscar. There's three things that come to mind for me here. First of all, I'm a big fan of SMART goals, and this seems to be me to apply really well here, because if I've gone to the trouble of going through the course, I've committed to myself and gained the knowledge, it's a shame not to make sure that I can carry it through myself. And a good mechanism is just setting a SMART goal for myself. And I imagine that is the final step that's often missed. Related to that, I would say one of the things that's really important is the immediacy of when I make a change. Even if I just make one change because of what I've learned or what I've reflected on, but I make that today. So I come away from the course and ask myself, what's the one thing that I'm going to do different as a result of the course that I've taken? But what's the one thing that I'm going to do different today? Tomorrow,
yeah.
It has most likely today.
Before you go to the third one, I would ask you something about this. So once I was thinking about it, that we organize a training in a given field, and then the participants don't have a chance to implement it in few months even. Let's say it would be project management training, but no project is to be managed in the upcoming weeks or months. Would you say it's maybe not the best timing for such training to happen, or that they still should need to practice even though
I'd say a couple of things. One is we're quite used to training where there is cases, or you bring a particular problem to the workshop and you're trying to solve it right there and then. So that's like probably even more ideal in terms of the timing. But yeah, I imagine there are topics where the timing is important, but if it's project management, for example, I can practice with my, planning my kid's birthday party or next ski holiday, because we're not saying implement all of it. We're not saying all of the things that you've managed, but it's important to get that momentum immediately. So just one thing to practice or one thing to implement immediately. I think that's the important. But I wouldn't necessarily say wait till the perfect moment to take the training. I'd just say make sure that you're aware of what's the change that you're going to make straight away, and know that it's diminishing over time the likelihood of you actually making that change if it's months after. So yeah, I'd say that. And then the third thing, I think somehow related as well, and this is what I would recommend for a trainer. And if this doesn't happen in the course, similar to the second one, if the course doesn't end with what's the one change that you're going to implement today, or the thing that you're going to do differently, the other thing that I would look for at the end is who's your buddy. And that is similar. It doesn't necessarily need to be someone in the course. It needs to be somebody who you can tell what you've learned and what you're trying to do, and set those check-in moments. And it doesn't necessarily need to be every week or 2 weeks. It could be 2 months. I had a buddy from a mental health and wellness course we attended together, and we agreed that we were going to implement these certain things. She was going to write gratitude journals, and I was going to make sure that I kept up with my regular learning. Self-paced learning just happened to be that. Now, when we spoke the following weeks, we got in this habit of checking in with each other, and no criticism, no judgment, just a moment to share what we were doing. But we caught up less frequently, and after months of not catching up, we had our check-in. And she shared with me that she had kept up really diligently, first because she built the habit, but secondly because she didn't want to come to that meeting and say that she hadn't kept it up. even in the environment where I'm not a judgmental person, I wouldn't criticize her. And in fact, it's really her business, but that was enough to keep her on the track of implementing what we had learned about.
Wow, so some very concrete tactics, and I really like, especially the first one about learning goals, because I got to know when I was exploring some research and how to make sure that people are motivated to learn, is that when they set out goals for themselves, it really increases their not only motivation but also attention during the course, because they always, whatever happens, it always resonates to the goal. So if I want to implement it at my work, whenever I learn something new, I look at it on from this perspective. So I think it really gives some framework for the instructors, for the people who design online courses, to make sure that those elements are included. Not only the knowledge that you want to share, but also taking care a little bit of supporting the learners through.
I think it's such a great point. So if I said at the end, what I would like to see is what are you going to do different now, and what are you going to, who's your buddy? At the beginning, I would like to see emphasis placed on why are you doing this? So related to the goals, but why is this important? And what does it, like, why bother at all? Because I think you're right, it helps you to connect throughout the course to the overall learning goals. But also, just as humans, we tend not to make good decisions based on future state, but we will make decisions, the week following the training, or the week after, or even maybe in the course, lower engagement. If we're just thinking about the now, if we can just take that time and think about what's the future state, why bother, right? What's this really for, deeply emotionally, then we're much more likely to be able to make it stick and much more likely to engage. I think you're right.
Great, a lot of concrete insights, and I think we can move on to, because we have two more questions to address before the big topic. One, and I will allow myself to answer this one. There was a question from Maciej, if it's more difficult to learn when we get older. So if at certain age, especially because world is changing right now, so we will need to learn, we will need to reskill, upskill over our lifespan. And is it harder for us if we get older? And the simple answer from research is no, it's not. The most cited research about it is on the taxi drivers from London, that whenever they attend the training to learn the map of London, to know all the streets, their hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for learning, is actually growing. So we have this plasticity, we keep on learning. Recently, I also got to know there was a research actually that said older people have lower capabilities, but the problem was that the research was not longitudinal. So at a given point of time, we asked young people and old people if they tested them in their capacity, but then the longitudinal research, so one person over time, actually did not replicate the results. So it means that maybe in the past generations, when we didn't have that much availability of education, when we didn't really when we weren't put in situations to always learn, then maybe our capacity decreased. But right now, people have potential to learn for at least until 80s, and it's keep on increasing as we get healthy. So this is answered. I didn't want to bother you with that, but what I wanted to ask you is, do you see this actually? Do you see this bias if people believe, oh, I'm too old for learning this? I'm like, how do you see this, and how do you challenge that?
Yeah, it's so. First of all, yeah, really interesting that some of the science that is coming out of this. And I have to say, we're on the Science of Business podcast, and my career is much more around business and management leadership than it has been around teaching and science. But where I have come across things in this space, the assumption that children can learn languages at a young age is being challenged at the moment, because it's I think it's much more about expectation, turns out, but lots of interesting research going on around that. I think that I think this is also something that's changed over the last couple of years. So if you think about leadership skills, for example, and let's imagine the, um, the 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 leader who's been in a position for some time and maybe hasn't been challenged to learn and adapt and change as frequently as their career progressed, and maybe, dare I say it, starts to feel like, oh, they're at the pinnacle of their career. They've done it, and they're there, and now they're drawing on their experience. I think that in the last couple of years, what that leader has had to learn about leading in a crisis, authentic leadership, uh, empathy, just all kinds of digital transformation has probably challenged in a really healthy way. But yeah, I don't buy it. I don't think that it's more difficult to learn when we get older. It's a matter of expectation. It's a matter of attitude. I can't help but think about in my own personal life. My mother doesn't like technology, and she doesn't have internet in her house, and obviously that frustrates me because it hampers our connection and communication. And I just think about what could we do if she possibly had set her own expectation that she could pick these things up. Not to criticize my mother, but in this example, my mother-in-law, I have a video of her with Oculus Rift dancing around fighting zombies in the front room because she's just embraced it, and it wasn't hard for her to learn how to use that.
I think we will also address that in some way in the upcoming questions about the stubborn learners and this being self-directed. But before we jump into that, there is a question from the audience that appeared right now, which is what changes you've realized between learning process before pandemic and now? What we've learned so far on learning that we didn't know before 2020. And I wonder, because in the beginning you mentioned a little bit about it, and that we realized that it's just like training in the gym, that we have different styles and we need to use the materials, the tools accordingly. Is there some other learning before and after the pandemic that you would add to that?
Yeah, a couple of things come to my mind. So yeah, thanks for the question, Camilla. We did a trends report in FutureLearn in the middle of the pandemic, and there was some really interesting insights around how inclusive people could find the online learning, which I think that's something that wasn't really coming up before. It was around being able to be in a space which is accessible by everybody, and whilst you want to engage with others, somehow there was less judgment. And I'm not sure that we were thinking that deeply about it before the pandemic. So that was a really interesting one to see. Besides that, I think that it would. I know I referred to the pandemic as this moment, and I think of it more as a catalyst rather than absolutely changing things. It's many of these things were happening already. So this understanding that we should be blending the online with the offline, the understanding that we could make an online training experience fit for lots of different needs, just using the technology. It was going slower and it just went much faster. So I think that's really the point for me. It's that the pandemic was a catalyst. It didn't change things on a U-turn, just like made us believe, because from one week to the next, we solved things that we thought were going to take years.
Great, thank you. And then there is this one I saved for a last one, and I think it's the most challenging. So let me give you the context behind this question. It was about a specific learner. So we have some performance review in the company. We have some concrete positions where this person should develop in their field, because it's coming from feedback from how they perform in comparison with the other team members. And then this person would say, no, I don't feel I need to learn this. There is so this stubbornness or this hesitance it's quite strong as an attitude. And I wonder, how do you address such attitudes?
It's a big question. And so I think there's a lot of dimensions to it. So let me name a few that come to mind for me, Radhik, and then I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
we can dig into a few of them. But first of all, the first thing that just jumps out to me, even when I see this word stubborn learner, is the concept of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And so when discussing with this person, I think that if we keep that in mind, it would help us as a coach, a manager, teacher, trainer to understand where this might be coming from, because it's probably something fairly deep. What helped this person to lean more towards fixed mindset rather than lean more towards growth mindset? And it can be that they were given labels in school, even or judged in school in a way that meant I have to be good at this thing and proven, and I can't show any kind of weakness or humility by admitting that I need to learn something, because actually my personality is very much connected to that. Somebody once gave me the label of smart, or so it can be quite deep set, and we can't stop with just this as a somebody who's being stubborn because they want to say no. It can be much more connected to this. After that, I mean, there's definitely a conversation about how quickly the world is changing, and maybe it's about bringing some of their visibility to that. What got them to the position where they are now, or the success where they are now, won't get them to the next step, or may not even maintain them in the position that they are now, because of the speed of change around us, and it's just getting faster. The other thing, two more things, Radhik, and then we can dive in. The other thing I would say as well is there's sort of a practical example that we have again here for in sports, or people who are real masters. I mean, if you think about a basketball player, a professional, they stand and hundreds of times do a chest pass to each other, even if they are playing on the US Olympic team. They do this because they need to make sure that they're continuing to sharpen their skills, and they do it with the other people so that they start to understand the other people that they're working with. So it's not about I've made it to the top and now I don't learn or practice even more. Never mind learn, just even practice. The best do that. So there's probably something to do with a motivation there. Final thing I would say about this is, let's assume that this person is within an organization, a company, like an enterprise company. There's a few stakeholders around this person who will impact their learning and impact their feeling towards learning and their attitude towards learning. One is the L&D team. So is the L&D team creating tools that are inspiring and enough flexible and options that this person can gravitate to one, and it fits their needs. The other is the executive, so the leaders of the organization. Are they role modeling the importance of learning themselves? Are they making sure that people understand that they, as the part of their job, they should be making space in their week to dedicate to learning? And are they giving them that responsibility? So not just the space, but the actual responsibilities, right? Your responsibility, part of your job, is to get yourself ready for, if not the next job for yourself, but get yourself ready for what else is coming, because the world is changing, and we know that. And are they giving that responsibility in such a way that it's like, you can deliver on your results today, but you're probably not going to be able to meet your responsibility to the company if you don't embrace the change that you need to do. And then the final stakeholder in this environment that we're building around this person to support them towards a growth mindset is their first line manager. And I mention this really specifically because I think this is so important, and it's probably in a company the stakeholder group that's given less focus, the least focus, and the least support to be able to coach somebody. But that first line manager also needs to role model, make sure that the right motivation is in place, coach, understand. And so they need also to be taught how to help somebody to learn. So it's a big question, and probably all sounds easier said than done, depending on who you're with.
Yeah,
But
I
one thing I
think
would
that,
say, it can't be accepted, because it's not fair to accept it as a like, you are stubborn, is just another label, which is a disservice to this person.
yeah, I love it. I think the major outcome, the major conclusion for me is that there always is a reason, and there could be plenty of those, and we need to we can't give up. If we realize it's not about the motivation, then let's search for something else until we find it. And it's interesting that you repeated the influence of manager. Like, I underlined it 2 minutes ago, and then you closed it up with this line manager. I think it's really important to remember that never the instructor or the L&D team should be alone in this. I think we are there to help, also to help the line manager on how to do that. But especially in these situations where motivation is not granted, I think manager is really important to help the learners, make sure that they know why they are actually um, needed in this process.
Yeah, and
Brilliant.
we know how influential managers are on our careers, on an individual's career, and we've all heard the stats around people leaving managers, not necessarily companies, if they leave and they feel like they're not growing. And so I have this strong feeling that we need to help the managers, because it's such a difficult job. There's a lot of deliverables in that management position, and they need to be deeply connected with the importance of learning too, and be inspired by it, and then demonstrate that inspiration. Because if it's just if it's just for compliance, then it's always going to remain that way. I don't know if that's part of the background of this question. If it's that, like, that's what's going on with the behind
Mhm.
the scenes of this question. But I'd feel like helping the first line manager, helping that person who is most influential on a day to day, is probably the first stop.
Yeah, I'm also taking that down as a note for recently. I'm trying to understand how to better shape the learning culture inside the organization. And you mentioned this time for learning, making sure everyone has some learning paths, and also supporting the line manager. This is what was missing in my current model, so I'll include that happily. Thank you for this comment. And I think we can move to the biggest question for today, that I prepared some research for you, which is about learning autonomously. And just to give you the impression of Radek from 3 months ago, before I started questioning myself, is so whenever I teach trainers about truths and myths of learning, of adult learning, I always refer to the myth of learning styles, because it is also well embedded in formal education, that there are some learning style. And in formal, they say we are visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and then there is in training another model from Kolb, that we are more learners by doing, by reflecting, and so forth. But the problem with all these models is that there is no research, no proven research that actually it helps learning. That if you have this style and you learn in this style, that you will learn better. Actually, what is proven is that if you mix styles, that's how you achieve better results. So you try different approaches. So this is Radek 3 months ago, and basically I would say we shouldn't really pay attention that much to the learner on their style and so forth. But then I discovered a research from 1991 that was also later on rediscussed by other scholars, and it appears it is still existing more in nursing education, in medical education, than in adult education. But very interesting read. So Gerald Grow, 1991, he presented a model that there are four stages of self-directedness as a learner. We are first dependent, then we are interested, then we are involved, and finally we are self-directed. And he was linking this strongly to Blanchard, to the situational leadership, that also our employees are first need a lot of guidance, a lot of direction, but in the end they are very self-driven as employees. He connected those two models, claiming that depending where the learner is, we should adjust our style, we should adjust the form of education we give them. So for instance, if the learner is more dependent, we give more authority to learning. So there would be more lectures, there would be more concrete tools, concrete answers. While the more they dive towards self-directedness, we organize more workshops, we invite them to co-create learning, and finally, we don't really organize their learning. We rather support them in learning by their own. So it clicked to me because in some of my training, I do realize my approach is I bring research pieces and then we try to deconstruct it. We try to figure out what does it mean for us. And the very same topic, the very same style, different groups. Sometimes it's brilliant. Everyone loves it. A lot of ideas pop up. Sometimes I get feedback, yeah, but maybe you should give us more examples. And it clicked to me that maybe it is connected to this, that we have different attitudes towards learning, and if we do, then maybe we won't actually learn that much from the educator. So this as the introduction, and I wonder if you also encountered such differences in self-directedness among learners.
Yeah, and the example that you gave there in terms of one classroom plan or one training plan, working with one group and not necessarily working brilliantly with the other group, brings the opportunity of personalization to mind for me. So if you define here autonomously as that I'm just going to follow a set path in a course, and I am on my own, no cohort, no sort of like social exchange, even though it's not face to face, it's online, and no sort of adaptation to what I need, then this is what I would describe as a lonely online experience. But if the learning experience or the course that I'm taking has ways of helping me to engage in a different way, so at this moment I don't need to absorb all this knowledge. I already got this. I'm much more at the stage of I need to reflect on this and maybe share experiences. Well, then I can jump to that stage. That's an element of personalization which you're not able to achieve as a trainer in that classroom. You may be able to get everybody to the same level outside with some kind of online learning, and then have more success in the classroom in a blended way because you've connected the two as well. So the options for this sort of personalization really open up. And not necessarily about learning styles, though. As you said, like kinetic and auditory and so on. Not necessarily that. I think beyond that, because it's also about my previous experience on this topic, and I think that context is absolutely everything. So it really depends what I'm learning about. For example, if I've been a snowboarder all my life, and then somebody asks me to go on skis, then it's similar. We're on the hill, we're doing the same type of a job, but in this point, the teacher can't be a coach and an inspirer and say, "What do you think we should do? How do you think you should put them on? And just go for it. I believe in you." No, there has to be an element of teaching about this thing, and it doesn't matter if I'm more of a self-directed, experienced person on the hill, because I'm learning something different, and the teaching has to adapt. What I think is really interesting about the paper that you just described as well, though, is the connection between teaching styles adapting to the situation and leadership styles, actually. So he made some connection with Blanchard, as you said there. But if we think about teachers as leaders, it's the same type of flexibility that's needed. When will I be a coach? When will I be just a teacher disseminating knowledge? Probably less and less, because knowledge is becoming more and more commoditized. It's available. It's at least out there. But when will I be more of a director, as in holding standards and telling but measuring and so on? And when will I be a coach and a cheerleader? So same thing in leadership, actually, as teachers. And I think more and more, if we think of teachers and trainers in this context as leaders, because you need to employ these similar skills in a very flexible, fluid way.
Yeah, I'm smiling because last week on another podcast, I actually discussed a research from military where the trainers who deliver the military program were evaluated in how good of leaders they are, and it appeared that it's also relevant to the level of learning from their peers. And we came to conclusions the same as you mentioned, that trainers should be also leaders and should develop in this field. But also what resonated with me is when you mentioned that it depends on what we learn. And I mentioned to you before our call that when I was learning Spanish, self-directedness didn't really work when I just started, because I didn't know what to use. I started to learn some vocab, but then I couldn't really put them into sentence. I couldn't speak. And I found out actually there is no better way than to go to attend to classes or to some instructor to get the feeling of the language before I get self-directed. So in this case, I was really dependent learner. But in some other contexts, I am fully self-directed, and I cannot really go to formal education anymore in, let's say, in evidence-based training, because usually I would be disappointed with not really addressing my very, very specific needs. That's what I'm taking. And one thing I wanted to ask you is, for the personalization, an idea popped up in my mind. If we asked in our needs assessment, if you included a question, just an open one, how do you prefer to learn? How do you like to learn? And evaluate what people answer. Like, what I wouldn't ask it at first, because I would expect that someone would say, yeah, I'm a visual learner. So then I would just drop those. But maybe they would tell, yeah, I really love a lot of examples. And that's actually this could fit into one or the other of the boxes.
I would ask a slightly different open question because of the importance of context. And I would say, what is the best way to learn this thing?
I'm noting it down because I will include that. We talked about how to make sure to implement. This will be my goal. You will be my buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to hear the answers to that as well. But the problem with it, all of this learning styles and how do people and how do individuals learn, it's just labels. So you heard me before. I'm a fan of the Carol Dweck and the growth mindset concept, and that's just labels, which lacks a lot of other dimension.
There is another research piece I also wanted to discuss with you, and I'm checking we still have some time for that. So building on the model from GROW, these 4 stages, Murray and Fisher developed a scale to evaluate if people are more or less self-directed. So we divide now from this context dependent and part dependent to more, if right now in my skill set, am I a self-directed learner in general? And they underline 3 factors. And what I would propose is that we go one by one and maybe figure out how we can embrace those. The first one was self-management. So if I'm managing my time well, if I'm planning well, if I'm prioritizing well in general, if I'm some sort of organized person, it seems straightforward to support learners in that. How do you think?
It seems straightforward. I was also just smiling to myself. The author of the previous paper, Gerald Grow, he had such an apt name, such a perfect name based on what we've been discussing so far. So for this one, to be organized, I'd say probably helpful. It also comes to mind to me, there's probably something here about teaching people how to learn. So if it's important to you to be organized with a plan to be able to learn something and to get
Mm-hmm.
the outcomes, and probably first step is to teach people the importance of that, learning how to learn in that way if it's important. And I might just challenge that, one person's organized and one person isn't. It's a skill, something that could be taught.
Yeah. Yeah, personality has some weight to it, but in general, we all can learn how to deal with our chaotic behavior. So I cannot
Yeah,
agree more.
if we want to, if we want to, maybe we like it. Yeah.
The second factor isn't that straightforward. So there is desire for learning, and some of the parts for it. I do recommend to search for Murray Fisher for the full paper, because there is, I think, 30 of the items in each of the factors, but just 3 of those in desire for learning is enjoying challenge, learning from mistakes,
Mhm.
and the need to know why.
Yeah, it's a curiosity, and
That's
so yeah, absolutely that would certainly resonate for me.
mm,
But I will also say, back to what we were talking about before, the not just the curiosity on the topic and the need to know why this happens, like why is the sky blue, but why am I doing it? What's the outcome? So
yeah.
if you had a strong desire to learn Spanish, you would persevere. That Duolingo was maybe not the right one, but that doesn't mean I'm not learning Spanish anymore. I find my way.
Mm, yeah, and also I think this is challenging in some way. This is in at least time for complaining about education system, but I think this is something that was forgotten about in formal education in Poland, in primary schools. We weren't really learning from mistakes. Mistakes were to be avoided.
Yeah,
We never were to get to know why this will be important. We just needed to learn by heart and so forth. So this
yeah.
desire for learning and this um, pure fun of learning, I think, is something that we need to develop more, especially to pay attention to this one. But
The fun of learning, I really love that. Just the fun of learn, just the pleasure of it. Filling our energy banks because it's an enjoyable thing. But also back to the question on the stubborn learner, in an environment where mistakes are to be avoided, then learning is to be avoided because you're supposed to make mistakes.
yeah. And the third one, it's connected to this first. So first was self-management. The third is self-control. So even though I'm planning, I'm managing my time, prioritizing, am I feeling responsible? Do I have this grit to actually continue to pursue my plans? And how would you support learners in this aspect?
Yeah, so I'd say two sides to that. There's a kind of a push and a pull, and the pull is my own grit, my own. I know my motivation, and I know that the hardest times are the ones where I'm learning most. But this is also where the teacher can play both an inspiring and motivating, but also a holding a benchmark and measuring and more of a like director role, because that's also of service of the learner.
Noting down. Great. It was fast, but I think
It was
this
fun.
will come back. This model will come back fast, fun, and just like learning should be, right? And by the way, my last maybe insight for this one, and taking your time to think about your last insight, is that I recently realized that those podcasts and the opportunity to talk with someone about something that really triggers me is a great way to learn also,
Yeah,
and
absolutely. For
something to
me too.
remember about.
Absolutely for me too. So yeah, appreciate you having me.
Thank you very much. Any last insights from you
You know,
on
I'm
how we should learn?
I'm going to reflect on what you just said there, which is this element of fun. And we didn't touch on that, but I think that might be one of the most important things.
Thank you very much. And for all the viewers, if you'd like to learn more about what Ian is doing, and he's doing some great work connecting universities um, to build some better programs that are based on what people actually want to learn, go to futurelearn.com. Ian McIlwain was my guest. Thank you.
Thank you, Reddick. Thank you, everyone.